Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. I'm doing a bit of a clearing job. I'm cutting back mainly the hardy geranium phaeum, which has got these wonderful, really rich, deep, dark purple, almost black flowers, which are fantastic in spring. The days, whether we like it or not, are getting shorter, and plants are very sensitive to that. And things like this geranium, which grows so well in spring, are now sensing the light falling, setting seed, and dying back. So by cutting them back, we shortcut that circuit and make space for these glorious plants, a whole raft of them, that will flower strongly until the first frost. When you cut back, it's important to cut back hard. If you leave half of it, half will die back, and then you might get some new growth growing amongst it, and it doesn't look any good. So cut hard. This process of clearing is something that's happening all over the garden, and here in the writing garden, it tends to look really good in spring. And the last few years, we've had trouble with it sort of fading away, just looking a bit drab and tired in high summer. So making a real effort to add plants, to give it extra impetus and zoom, and that's not difficult. And remember, the writing garden is based upon the idea of cow parsley. And by the way, this is cow parsley. This is self-sown cow parsley in here. Now, but more importantly, this is borage. It's white borage, and white is the color theme here. And because it's a hardy annual, that's it. It's over. I'm not going to pull them up as such. I'm going to start cutting because there are other things in here I want to keep. I hate gloves, and I hardly ever wear them. But I do for borage, because borage has tiny little hairs all over it that are really quite abrasive. Right, I'm going to just clear a little bit more in here. Now this is Angelica, which is coming through. Angelica, of course, has great big umbels and will grow really tall, so we'll leave that. This is a Astrantia, which is lovely. You can see it flows along the edge of the path. And that's beautiful, and we want to keep that going as long as possible. And while I've cleared the decks, I'm just going to give this little privet pom-pom a slight trim. You can see it's flowering. Don't often see privet flowering. Quite pretty white flowers, which of course would work here in the writing garden, but I'm just going to trim it off because the whole point of topiary like this is the contrast between the clipped topiary and the looseness of the planting. This is a Cosmos Purity. And it has two great virtues which make it really suitable here for the writing garden. The first is that it's white, and the second is it's quite tall. These will go on flowering into November. Now, while I'm doing this, we're going off to Bishop's Cleeve in Gloucestershire to join Richard Marshall and his national collection of penstemons in all their glory. And not just to share them, but to share the evident deep delight that he gets from growing each and every one of them.
Can I point to that? I mean, you know, what a penstemon. It's just mad, isn't it? What a plant. I know people have said it's a bit in your face, but actually I rather like it. I go for that. I'm Richard, and I've been gardening most of my life. About 40 years ago, before we came here, That's when I really discovered penstemons. We brought home the first one. Following year, we went to some more gardens and there was a guy there selling loads and loads of penstemons, so a couple more came home. Then we got to about 10, then we got to 15. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we got to about 50 and it became clear that most of them were really, really rare. So that's the point at which the National Collection came along. So we now have 107 different varieties in the National Collection. There's about 130 penstemons in total here. It's only when you start collecting them you start to see the differences, that you start to appreciate them even more. One of the things I really love about penstemons is the huge variety there is. You've got everything from this tiny little thing here. This is pinifolius Wisley Flame. And look at the size of the leaves, they're absolutely tiny. And that's because it comes from Southwest America and from down into Mexico. Flowers are so delicate, but they still have exactly the same structure as any other penstemon, with the 5 lobes around the mouth, 3 at the bottom and 2 at the top. But unmistakably a penstemon. This one, which is Breeden, and look at the difference in size of leaves. Very different growing conditions. This is a garden hybrid. As are all these here. These are all garden hybrids, apart from this one. And this is Heterophilus, so it's a species cultivar, and this is Heavenly Blue. So really, there's a penstemon for everyone. They don't take a huge amount of looking after. And planting them at the right time of year, you can get them growing on quite strongly during the summer so that they're robust enough for the winter. What you don't really want to do is to go planting them late in the season because they haven't got a time to get established. Just leave them over the winter. Once the danger of heavy frost is past, I will cut them back to the ground and let the new shoots take over. Penstemons don't mind full sun. They quite like full sun. They like a free-draining soil. They do not like having their feet wet. How do you kill a penstemon? They are pretty robust. There's one thing that will kill a penstemon. It's a little grub and it's about that long, and it's a chafer grub. And if you see a penstemon suddenly keel over and just sort of turn its toes up in the air, there's a fairly good bet that that was responsible. This is another of my favourite penstemons. This is penstemon blackbird. Waves around in the breeze, looks absolutely delightful, lovely burgundy colour. If you deadhead it regularly, it'll produce a succession of flower spikes right the way through the summer until the first frosts. If you want a white, this is probably a good one to go for. This is Higcote white. It's not readily available, but it is out there if you search for it. Well worth finding, and to my mind, the best of the whites. This is quite different. This is Lynette. It's got very delicate foliage, small but lovely little flowers, lovely colour on the outside, and very delicate markings on the inside. And it looks like it's going to be a really good garden plant. I've not had this for very long, but it's bulking up nicely and seems nice and robust. What more could you want? The very first penstemon we bought was one we came across on a garden visit. I still have the descendant of that plant. Its proper name is Penstemon Andenkan and Friedrich Hahn, but you'll know it by its English selling name, which is Penstemon Garnet, and that's what almost everyone calls it, including me when I don't want to have to say Andenkan and Friedrich Hahn. It's a cracking plant. It's got just the right size leaves. It keeps on flowering for a really long period. It was one of the first to start. With deadheading, it'll come back again and it'll keep going until the frosts. This shoot has just about come to the end of its useful life. The way to keep the show going for the rest of the season is to keep deadheading, and I do this on a regular basis. Once a day I come round and deadhead. Cut just above a pair of leaves. You want to go low down. If you go too high, you risk all that new growth making the stem top heavy and it breaking. In a few weeks' time, you'll have new shoots and there will be flowers on them. I deadhead for 3 reasons. Firstly, that. Secondly, I really don't want seedlings. And thirdly, by the autumn, you'll have a nice little pool of small shoots that are ideal for cutting material. Propagation, well, this is my way of doing it. I use these trays, so when the time comes to separate them, when they've rooted in 8 to 12 weeks' time, there's no problem with damaging the roots, getting them out of their little modules. Here's cutting material. So we'll snip just above a leaf pair there, and we want enough material, so I'll probably go there for the second cut, just below a node, and that's important because that's where the hormones are most concentrated. Now, that's a bit too big for this little tray. You don't need that amount of material, so I'm just going to snip off. Then I'll pop it into a bit of water just to wet it very slightly, shake the excess off. Hormone rooting compound or not? Well, I've had success with a couple of penstemons that I've found really difficult to root. So I've started using it. Now, this is important. Never try and push the cutting in because the chances are you'll damage the stem. So, little dibber, hole, just drop it gently into the hole, firm it down gently with your fingers, little squeegee of water, and that's one cutting taken. Don't forget the label. A lot of us take cuttings in the autumn and then you grow them on over the winter, ready to pot on in the spring. Others do it in the spring using material left over from last year. I just love them. Why do I like penstemons? Well, to some extent, I have to say there's a bit of sentimental value associated with them. We've had them for 40 years. They're old friends. They're great value plants. They go well in any mixed herbaceous border. Huge variety of colours, leaf forms, you name it. To be honest, I just wouldn't be without them.
I've tried growing penstemons in this garden for years and they just don't like it at all. It's the wet soil all winter and they never survive more than about 2 years, and to be honest, I've given up, which is a shame because obviously they are very beautiful. Now, there are two trees here in the dual garden which are both interesting in their own way and in completely different ways, but really doing good things. The first is this one. This is the Chinese goat horn, Carriera, and it's quite rare. It can be a bit shy to flower. I looked it up and it meant it can take 50 years before it produces flowers. Well, it's flowering beautifully now. This is the second time it's done so for us. Now, over on this side of the dual garden, we have a Polonia, the foxglove tree. Now, this is an enormous tree. This is as big as a beech. You know, it can grow 80 foot tall, festooned with wonderful lavender foxglove-like flowers. But if you prune it hard, it won't produce flowers, but its foliage will be extra big. And earlier this spring, I cut it back to a stick. And look, it's produced these enormous leaves, which make a really dramatic foil for the plants around them. It won't flower, or at least not for a long time, but if you grow it in a border and keep coppicing it or pollarding it, you will get a repetition of these vast leaves, which are both exotic and a really good foil. So both trees doing a job in a very different way for the rest of the plants here in the dual garden. But so much for the good, because now I have a problem to deal with. Come on, come, good boy. Now, I brought you to the corner of the grass borders because I have a problem. This is Rosa moisei, and I planted it, 29 years ago. However, in the last year, this has developed problems. You can see it's died back. And I believe that this is fire blight. It's a bacterial disease that affects members of the rose family. So that's not just roses, but includes apples, pears, hawthorn, medlars, plums. And what it looks like, the reason why it's called fire blight, because it looks like it's been torched. You can see that looks like it's been burnt. That is not going to recover. So at very least, if you've just got one stem, you should cut it right back and cut it out. This is quite badly affected. It's a species rose. So what I'm going to do is cut it completely to the ground, burn everything, and then hopefully the new growth will be healthy. So right down at the base, right down at the ground, cut. Now don't be too alarmed by this. Fire blight is apparently quite rare. There are a whole series of factors that will increase the chances of fire blight. Poor ventilation is one. The second thing is warm, wet winters. It's worth pointing out that you do need to disinfect any tools you use before cutting anything else. Right, let's continue. When you have cut it back, do not shred it, do not add it to your compost heap. Burn it if you can. Much more glamorous and much more beautiful than me trying to dispose of this is a garden in Erith in South London, which Arit went to visit. And it's a garden that has been transformed by the local community.
From the outside, you'd never imagine what lies beyond these walls. But step inside and you discover a garden that stands apart in an urban landscape. A place where ingenuity and community have turned an overlooked space into something thriving, resilient and unexpectedly beautiful. The contrast is incredible. I mean, I can still hear the sounds of the city behind me, but in here it's completely different. It's green, it's lush, and it feels really special. Erith's former library dates back more than a century. After falling into disrepair, it stood derelict for years, along with the garden that surrounded it. But in 2019, it was brought back to life with the garden at the heart of its transformation. Selina Ozan is the head gardener at the Exchange. Selina.
Hi, Arit.
The small part I've seen of this garden walking through is fantastic. Tell me how it's laid out.
So the garden wraps around the building, this gorgeous old Edwardian building, and that in itself creates a lot of different sort of niches. There's almost 5 gardens in one. Where we are at the minute, this is sort of woodland edge in the back garden. The front garden is sand bed, so everything's planted in around 30 centimetres of sand. It's super exposed, really sunny. We also have a kind of fern yard, we call it, which is deep shade, gets almost no sun. So it's really cool that with such a small space, there are so many different areas and kind of microclimates.
A lot to keep you on your toes.
Yeah, exactly.
And such a vast array of plants as well. I'm sort of eyes darting everywhere. So how do you garden here?
So we have a zero irrigation approach, which means different things for different parts of the garden. So in the front, in full sand, there's no watering whatsoever unless I'm establishing a new plant. But in the rest of the garden, it's sort of spot watering when something looks like it's struggling. But generally, the rules are I mulch once a year in spring, a really thick layer of organic matter, and that locks in the moisture. But also I would say a really important part of no irrigation is just covering the soil with as many plants as you possibly can to really trap in that moisture.
Well, it looks fantastic. The garden was planted in 2021 by around 70 local volunteers of all ages, where in total 3,500 plants were planted in 2 days, with many making their way into the dry garden, which sits at the entrance and embodies the climate-first approach. This dry garden has demonstrated how it's tolerated everything that's being thrown at it. No water, high winds that are coming up from the Thames, and also the fact that it's south-facing, so it's having to cope with a lot. But take a look at this Pinus halepensis, for example, a drought-tolerant tree. But in this situation, it really adds something unusual. It has a very light, airy habit. I know that Selina has done some pruning with it. I think that's really added into the vibe of this space. So again, if we're at home and we're thinking about our planting borders and how to design into them, we have to take into consideration the soil conditions and the aspects. But the overall look and feel, that's where the magic starts, and I think that's really happened here. This section of the garden is clearly dominated by this really large sycamore. The plants in this area are true botanical survivors, not only coping with lower light levels in the shade, but also competing with the roots of the sycamore above. And of course, we need to be able to bring my eye down into a more human scale. And the design has been done by using these allium quicksilver to do that. Now, what's really lovely about the design here is that there's a topography in the garden that's been worked with. All of the pathways are very curved and very gentle, following the slopes, and that gives a real ease with the space. But also, it's about bringing the planting up close and personal to me as I'm walking through the garden. So there's height, so there's the use of the cardoons, for example, and then the vertical accents of the digitalis lutea, which are really there acting like sentinels throughout the space. And this palette of greens and the sort of silvers here are really calm and restful and add to the ambience. The garden demonstrates the power of right plant, right place, showing how carefully chosen plants can thrive, even as our climate becomes more unpredictable. The same thoughtful approach runs through the site, where reclaimed materials have been used throughout. Everywhere you look in this garden, it's telling a story of reuse. So whether it's the fences or the pathways, even the pavers have come from this garden. Aggregates and clay were collected and taken to a local community workshop where they were made, using local materials and reimagining it in this way. It really does give a sense of place. It just adds into the layers and textures that are creating the most wonderful atmosphere. What's incredible is how many different experiences are created in such a compact space. Through matching the right plants to the right conditions, each space has developed its own character and atmosphere, creating a garden that's just asking to be explored, and somewhere the local community can feel part of and enjoy.
It's been a place that seems to be like a heart for the community.
I just love being in the garden because there's nothing like this in Arit. You just look at it, it's amazing, you can hear the birds. It's our sanctuary.
It's nice to see people coming in and families enjoying the space.
Every week we come down, it's different and it's brilliant. It really is lovely.
I'm just so pleased that the building has been taken over and has been used for a community project and turned into this fantastic garden that's a lovely space for the community to come and visit.
Although this garden is very much looking to the future, the past hasn't been left behind. The greenhouse epitomises this. The design was inspired by the first ever mobile library in the UK, commissioned here in Erith. This is amazing. What a greenhouse.
It's really cool, isn't it? We do a lot of propagation in the garden. I've really ramped it up since I started.
Roll my sleeves up. So what have we got here?
So we're sowing some biennials today, Digitalis ferruginea and Delphinium requienii. They're biennial, all sort of short-lived perennial, and biennials are normally sown June, July, and then you get your flowers next spring, summer.
This is quite a special place, isn't it? I mean, what does it feel like to have your very own living laboratory?
I know, it's really cool. I feel really lucky, especially to have a space like this to work in and add in the plants that I really love. Yeah, having that creative outlet is fantastic.
This garden has been restored by a community for a community, and they have poured on resource and creativity and real care, and you can see that through every aspect of the garden. And what's really powerful to take from this is that in our cities, you know, with climate change and all of the tough challenges that are ahead of us, that it's so important that spaces like this are there, that are resilient and are full of beauty and joy.
I think what was really interesting about that garden was the way that it combined two elements that don't often get combined together. Because on the one hand, you have community gardens that do incredible work and involve people, and they create places of dynamism and love, but not necessarily of sort of great horticultural, or at least design merit. And then you have private or corporate gardens that can afford to hire a designer and they look really wonderful, but they don't involve the community at all. And this seems to do both. You have a really beautiful garden, and yet it is completely integrated with the local community. So that's incredible. I'm combining raspberries and squashes, which is not a natural marriage. And therein lies a tale, because back in March, I decided to move raspberries and make this a fruit bed. And so I put up the structure, planted raspberry canes, and waited for them to grow. And waited. And waited. And by and large, they haven't grown at all. But I have got the structure. And as the raspberries aren't using it, I thought I would plant my pumpkins and squashes in the pathways that I had hoped to use to collect raspberries, so that then I can train them up the structure. And I've got a mixture between pumpkins and squashes. Don't get too het up about the difference between the two. Essentially, a pumpkin has a harder skin and keeps longer, and a squash a little bit of a softer skin and keeps less long. But they both keep, and you know, if you ripen them properly, they'll keep for months and months and months, sometimes up to a year. This is one called lekor, a squash, which I've never grown before. But it looks good, and importantly, has very good taste. And I grow these to eat. The secret of success with squashes is really rich soil, plenty of water, and plenty of heat. It's not so much extreme heat, it's just they don't like cold at all. This one is called blue kiri. And they have this sort of grey-blue skin, which is very handsome. It's not a big squash, but it's another one that is really good to eat. Pop that in there. Now, what's good about this spot is I've got a big water butt, so easy to water with rainwater. I've got a tap nearby, so watering them is easy. And you never want to let them dry out. I've got supports, so when they grow, they can be supported and the weight of the fruit will be taken. And because I come to the greenhouse every day, I'll keep an eye on them. They won't be just stashed away somewhere. So hopefully we'll get a good crop. So much for the squashes and pumpkins, which are, of course, members of the cucurbit family. And that includes squashes, pumpkins, courgettes, cucumbers, gourds, and melons. And they all have slightly different growing demands and needs, although they share the same need for water, rich soil, and heat, but the extent of which is critical. So, for example, courgettes are by far the easiest cucurbit to grow. They will tolerate lower temperatures, they're pretty unfussy, and a lot of us grow them outside without any problems at all. Cucumbers, I've already planted some outside, I've got some growing in here in a pot. They again, if you choose your variety right, are not difficult to grow, particularly if you've got a greenhouse. The last of them, melons though, are much more particular. Yes, they need lots of water, yes, they need rich soil, but they need heat. And the only way you can really grow them in this country is in a greenhouse. And I grow my melons in pots. It is important to make sure they have good drainage, drill extra drainage holes, and make them nice and big. I've got some here, and I'm going to put 3 in a pot that size. I've made up a compost mix which is partly a peat-free bark-based compost, but also plenty of garden compost. And you can see the bits in there. And that means that they have the richness and also the water retention. I've got a variety here called green nutmeg. I confess I've not grown this before. I looked it up and people raved about it. But we'll pop them in on the edge, like that. We'll pop that in there like that. Now, they will need support. And we'll put them in next to each one, right down to the bottom. The way to get the fruits at their best is to be ruthless about thinning them. You don't want more than 2 fruits per plant. And then, for a week or so before you harvest them, you want to starve them of water and feed. This condenses the sugars and makes them taste so much better. And feeding once a week, as I say, a tomato feed will do the job fine, but we use liquid seaweed, and that also is very good indeed. Now, we're off to Wensleydale to visit the garden of Jenny Radbourne. Now, Jenny is a florist, but she found that her approach to her own garden was transformed dramatically overnight.
When we got the house, it was ramshackled and needed a lot of work. The garden was my blank canvas. It was where I was going to get to be completely and utterly in charge and creative, where I could let my floristry skills and my love of plants absolutely bloom. I'd been flowering a big wedding the day before I got sick and got up to get ready for work and realised that my legs felt strange. We called an ambulance. I knew there was something really seriously wrong. I'd never felt a pain like it. And that was when, I became immediately paralysed below the waist, couldn't feel anything. Transverse myelitis, it's where the body attacks itself, an autoimmune disease, and I had the acute form, and it is like an explosion in the spinal cord. After several weeks in hospital, making very little progress, I came home. The garden was absolutely calling to me, and my incredible husband moved my body for me. He physically got me doing things, got me into the garden. I don't think I ever lost hope. I think I always just thought I could get some feeling back and get my legs moving. And me in this garden, you know what, we're going to do this. And we have. Yeah, we have. I wanted a central pathway just because I love symmetry. I'm a bit wobbly and it's gravel, and actually it's quite thick gravel. So if I fall over, I fall onto gravel. I've got bark chippings in other areas. It's a nice, easy landing. It also grips my feet, which sounds ridiculous, but when I'm walking on it, it's like my feet sink into it and I get a really good connection between my brain and my feet, which I don't always get. We planted things like the salix. They don't do amazingly well, probably the wrong choice. Gardening, you're just experimenting all of the time, and you think something will work and you think, oh, it's a wet garden in winter, so they're going to be fine. But actually, because this is raised, it's probably too free draining. Yeah, I love the experimental phase of it too. Interspersing with foxgloves, some alliums, alchemillus again, really easy to divide. We had a lot of lupins from when we bought the cottage, and then lavender and cosmos. And when something dies off, I tend to get something from the cutting patch that I've brought on and fill in the gaps, basically. The physiotherapy you get planting a garden, from moving things around, there's nothing more determined than a woman that needs to get a bag of compost down a garden, quite frankly. It was garden rooms, it was all divided up, and we levelled it to get me access. In order to have enough plants to fill the borders, I made the decision to use division and also to take cuttings. And I like the repeat planting, so I like to follow a theme through the garden to give a level of cohesion. It is quite windswept, so normally at this time of year the delphiniums come out and then we have 50-mile-an-hour winds and they're snapped. But touch wood, at the minute, it's all good. Down here is the perfect place for a shady border. There's not a lot of shade in my garden, so we've been able to plant up lovely fatsias and some gorgeous ferns. Just in this area here, we've let this be
It's one of my favourite bits. It is pretty wild, but it's pretty lovely too. And the poppies, because my husband's military, they have a real significance for us. It's a really lovely space for a little bit of reflection. As human beings, we're on this sort of this hamster wheel of functioning at a million miles an hour, trying to do all things, be all things to all people. And I had to learn to live in the slow lane. And if I'm completely honest, the slow lane has brought me so much joy and so much pleasure, and it isn't a bad place to be. This started with my absolute desperate need to grow flowers. As a florist who couldn't work as a florist, I just wanted to produce flowers. It's quite productive. The soil is a mix of lovely garden compost and then some manure, some peat-free compost on the top. And it's worked really well. So here we are with some nigella popping out. They're coming to say hello. We've got larkspur, calendula, got lots of little seedling babies to go in. It's my little bit of heaven, really. This is where I grow my seedlings, so this would be covered in shelving in spring, and it's where I can stay warm in winter. It's the most heavenly place to be. It's also where I create some art. I press flowers into clay and create botanical time capsules. It's certainly a rejuvenating space. It ticks every box, this little greenhouse. And the scent of the geraniums and the scent of the tomatoes, and it's like being a child again on the allotment with my dad, and the smell just takes you back. There are going to be blips, there are going to be times where it doesn't feel possible, and there are times where you think, I cannot do this. And it's okay to have those times, but it's also really, really important that you remember that you can achieve so much by just saying yes mentally and forging forward. I was meant to come here, and I was meant to nurture this garden back to life, and in doing so, this garden has nurtured me back to life.
I think Jenny's story reinforces the truth that gardens always have a personal story. Is you can have a generalized idea of what's a good plant or a beautiful garden or certain ways that you should do things, but in the end, they're intensely personal. And what they mean to you and what you put into them and what you get back from them is always where the magic happens. It's that relationship between gardener and garden that makes them so special. Now, I am having an intense relationship at the moment with this wonderful lily. It's called Claude Fried. I chose it for the Paradise Garden because it's voluptuous, and the Paradise Garden should be about richness, the sound of the water, this sense of just being surrounded by riches of all kinds. And this does the trick. It's essentially a woodland plant, so it grows quite happily underneath the crab apples here. And it's tall, and it's proud, and it's loud, but with style and elegance. And while it's flowering, it is one of the stars of the garden. Good boy. Going this way. Come on. Come on. Normally, when I come in the potting shed, it's to sow seeds that are going to perform this year. However, once you get to high summer, the returns on that gets less and less. But it's not too late. In fact, it's a good time to be thinking about next year for perennials. So, for example, this is Lysimachia Beaujolais. It's got lovely sort of burgundy-coloured spikes of flower that were really trendy about 5 years ago at Chelsea. But they're a good garden plant. I've sown these this spring. Now, there are 6 plants here. If you had to go to a garden centre and buy those, it might cost you sort of around 50 quid, whereas the seed definitely didn't cost more than a fiver. I've got a tray here of echinacea. They'll flower next year, not this year, but that's part of the slow process. Likewise, these aquilegia, which will flower next spring, definitely. Now, there are a number of different ways you can do it. With small seed, you need a seed tray and sprinkle them. With larger seed, it's worth growing into modules. I'm going to start with a perennial foxglove. This is Digitalis parviflora, which is going to be perfect for the woodland garden. Now, these are very small seeds, so I'm going to sow them into a small seed tray. Just fill it with a very basic coir-based compost. And the answer is to sprinkle them very lightly over the surface of the compost. Protect them, but you don't have to heat them. Now, this is a geum blazing sunset, which is destined for the jewel garden. Geums love Longmeadow. They grow really easily. They really like our heavy, rather damp soil. And if you've got heavier soil and it's reasonably wet where you are, geums are a good plant to grow. These are going to be pricked out. So it's not the end of the world if you get a little clump growing. Now, geums are best covered lightly. And I'm going to do that with some vermiculite. Finally, I've got modules. Now I've got a lupin. And this is chandelier, which is a good yellow. And I'm putting 1 per module. And actually, growing perennials is all about a little bit of patience, connecting to a slower rhythm of life. What I'm going to do is move them over and simply pile more compost on top, spread it thinly, and then wipe it all off. So what remains is just enough to cover the seeds. And of course, all these will be carefully nurtured, pricked out if need be, potted on if need be, placed out in the garden exactly where I want them, with the intention of them being part of a very carefully thought through performance next summer. But actually, a lot of our very best garden flowers happen by accident, as Rachel discovered when she visited Hanham Court in Gloucestershire.
There's something wonderfully alive about a garden where plants are free to roam. Plants that readily seed themselves around shouldn't be shied away from. They are an incredibly useful tool to the gardener and can be used to great effect. Here at Hanham Court, they create an atmosphere of romance, softening edges, filling gaps, and bringing a little wildness into the design. What we gardeners call self-seeders are simply plants that drop as seeds and are now growing away happily without any help from us whatsoever. And I love them because they're opportunistic, they're easy, and they're free. Self-seeders come in many different forms, and fennel is a really good example of a perennial that also self-seeds. So this plant itself, the main plant, will last for several years. You'll find little baby fennels coming up all over the place. So if you don't want this sort of plant, then take them out while they're young, before they've really got in there. And then a bit later on in the summer, you get flowers which are umbelliferous, so you've got lots and lots and lots of tiny yellow flowers. And those are actually edible, and they've got that sort of aniseed flavour. I grow it in semi-shade and in full sun, and it's happy in both. But as I said, those seedlings will go everywhere. For any seed to germinate successfully, it needs exactly the right combination of moisture, temperature, light, and contact with the soil. Thousands of seeds may be produced, but only a small number find the perfect conditions to establish. So the plants we see here are the survivors, and because they've germinated where they'll spend their entire lives, their roots develop naturally. As a result, they're generally tougher, more resilient, and more self-sufficient. This is Nigella, which is an annual, and that means that either you, the gardener, have to sow it, or you have plants from last year and they have self-sown, spread their seed all over the place, and then popped up again this year. And they like somewhere hot, dry, sunny. They don't like to be sitting in sort of wet clay. Beautiful azure blue flowers, although it does also come in various shades of pink and purple and white. Nigella have a fairly brief flowering period, so if you want to extend that, then you've got your self-sown plants in here, and then you would add some that you've sown yourself a little bit later, so they're smaller when they go in, and that would just extend it for a little bit. But they also have really beautiful seed heads, so something interesting to see right the way through the summer. There's something so evocative about foxgloves. They're very romantic plants, and they're also brilliant self-seeders. Now, they're biennials, which means that they take 2 years to complete their life cycle. After they've flowered, they drop the seed and make a small plant, and then that overwinters, flowers again the next year, and then the same process continues. So to really establish a patch of digitalis, it's a good idea to sow seeds in 2 consecutive years, and then you've really got them. But they also love to self-seed. If they haven't gone into the place that you think they should be, you can orchestrate a little bit. You can dig up that young plant and move it so that the following year it'll flower exactly where you want it. A bit of cooperation between nature and the gardener. But I think they're absolutely beautiful, all brought together like this. Well, here's a perfect spot to enjoy the sunshine. This lovely bench, and then very cleverly it's been planted up around it in a way that just makes it feel as if it's been here for hundreds of years. And in fact, if you look around, most of these plants are repeated not because they've been planted, but because they've seeded themselves into the gravel. And that's because they're absolute sun lovers. They like a really thin soil and not to be overwatered. They can withstand drought very well. So this dianthus is echoed in another couple that are over there. And then the stachys, which has these lovely soft felted leaves, often called lamb's ears, and that loves to sort of run around and put itself through the gravel. And then the essence of this planting just continues all the way down through the gravel path. So you've got things like the campanula and the valerian just softening not only these monolithic yews, but also the edge of the path. So it sort of sweeps in and out. Some of those will be planted and others will have self-seeded into the gravel, and the effect is beautiful. If you want to encourage this at home, you don't need to buy lots of plants. Introduce 1 or 2 good self-seeders and let nature do some of the work for you. Usually, self-seeders find the perfect spot. But here, this syringium, which likes well-drained conditions, has leapt, frogged the gravel and gone straight into the grass. Paving and steps offer something different. The cracks and joints between stones create tiny microhabitats, little pockets where seeds can lodge and moisture can collect and organic matter gradually builds up. Rather than being a completely hostile place for plants, paving can actually become a series of small planting opportunities. Where the paving is more shaded, and you've got that sort of coolness and better moisture retention in those gaps between the slabs, it's a perfect spot for one of my favourite self-seeders, Alchemilla mollis. And it's such an amazing plant. You get those beautiful acid green flowers towards the end of spring and in early summer, and they're accompanied by lovely, rather palmate-shaped leaves, which cling on to any moisture, so you get these lovely raindrops just settling on the leaf surface, which is very beautiful. This is another favourite self-seeder, Erigeron carvensianus. It's Mexican fleabane. And actually, in many ways, the individual flowers look a lot like our own native daisy that we get in the lawn. But this one has this lovely effect of sort of white tinged with rosy pink, which is so beautiful. And to keep those flowers coming, well, I don't deadhead. It's one of those instances where the plant just seems to do it itself. It'll go into every single available crack once it's found a place that it's happy with, in between the paving stones, up the walls, across the top of the stone. Really long flowering period as well, so you get masses of flowers. It's the perfect example of a plant finding its own perfect spot. There we are. Two self-seeders, Nigella and Erigeron, flowering together, and that is such a beautiful effect. Nature paints a picture. Self-seeders are invaluable in the garden. They bring that little touch of the unexpected, that bit of romance. And yes, we can edit, we can tweak, we can move, but I think also as gardeners, perhaps we need to sometimes just step back and allow those plants to show us exactly where they want to grow, because that's when the magic happens.
The thing about self-sown plants is they find the place they want to be. So, for example, here there are these incredible mulleins that are really difficult to grow in this garden, but they're very happy and magnificent and even monstrous growing between the cracks of the paving. And we do get self-sown plants popping up all over the garden. Foxgloves have a habit of appearing where you least expect them often. Poppies, of course. And we've even got a rambling rose. And you'd scarcely believe you could grow it from seed, but it's there. And it's found its own way there. And like all these self-sown plants, it's very happy. Good boy. Going this way. Come on. Come on. Right. I am now going to tell you a tale of disaster, because I have a bed of garlic here that I put in the ground last autumn. And until about a month ago, they looked really good. But over the last few weeks, they have declined noticeably, and the green has just turned brown, and there's clearly not something right. And I had a look the other day, and what I have is allium white rot. And that is not good news, because when you harvest your bulb, you'll notice there's a lot of rot at the base of the stem. And you might well see white dots all over the bulb. And this is a fungus. And the fungus attacks the bulb, and in some cases can reduce it to complete mush. And in almost every case, the bulb will rot very quickly. They won't store. It also means, much more importantly, that it will spread to all members of the allium family. So in this particular piece of ground, I can't grow any alliums. And in the vegetable garden, that really amounts to onions, shallots, garlic, elephant garlic, and leeks for at least 5 years, and could be as long as 15 years. Now, I will pick these up and collect them all, and they mustn't go on the compost heap. They should be burnt. Over here, I've got elephant garlic. I am going to harvest these now, just in case it spreads. You shouldn't use the same fork on a clean piece of ground. You should disinfect it in between, but I know I'm not going to grow any alliums here for the foreseeable future. Right, I'm going to finish harvesting my elephant garlic, which I think is fine. And while I'm doing that, here are your jobs for the weekend. Delphiniums have been very good for me this year, but all good things come to an end. And when the flowering is over, rather than letting them set seed, it's a good idea to cut them back. Don't just snip off the seed heads, but go right down to the base of the stem. Remove this, and this will encourage the plant to grow again, throw up a new flower stem, which should flower before the end of summer. Any seedlings sown in rows will need thinning. I've got wallflowers here, but it applies to any seeds you might sow, and at this time of year, particularly vegetables. Thinning the rows themselves from the edges, just removing any clumps and groups so you're down to one single line. Then in a week or so, as the seedlings grow bigger, you can start to thin them to the required spacing. Everybody who grows broad beans will find that sooner or later they get affected by black fly. These look terrible, but the broad bean aphid only feeds on the freshest, juiciest growth. And the easiest way to deal with them is simply snap off the top few inches of the plant, thus reducing their food supply. The sad truth is that we are coming to the end of the main rose season. I say main rose season, but of course, most modern roses go on flowering all summer, or will die back a bit and then come back and have another flush, or flower slightly less intensely, but they keep going. It's the old roses, the gallicas like this one, which once they've done their stuff, that's it. However, there's no question that if you can deadhead assiduously, you can extend the rose season. Use secateurs and go right back down the stem to something. Now, in this case, it's another couple of shoots, and cut it off there. It could be a leaf, it could be another bud, and that stimulates side shoots, which then stimulates more flowers. And as well as being good for the roses, it's good for you too, it's certainly good for me. I love doing this. And if you just come out 10 minutes every day, maybe early in the morning or when you get back in the evening, and just have a quiet, calm time, focusing on the roses, letting the rest of this crazy world just wash away for a few moments, that is very restorative. However, that is also all we've got time for today. I will see you back here at Longmeadow next time. So until then, bye-bye.
you.